Welcome to No Epilogue Productions' Evening of Poetry. Samuel Taylor Coleridge described poetry as the best words in the best order. Edgar Allan Poe described it as the rhythmical creation of beauty in words. Poetry is when an emotion has found its thought and the thought has found words, according to Robert Frost. And W.H. Auden wrote that poetry is the clear expression of mixed feelings. Poetry is known to rhyme, yet many poems do not. Poems can be very, very long or extremely short. Poetry can tell stories, reveal thoughts, help us mourn, help us celebrate, and can inspire us. Many poems offer life lessons. Others offer observations on life. Poems can make us cry, make us proud, make us smile, and some can make us laugh out loud. Tonight, we hope to offer you a selection of verse that will encompass all of that. We're going to open with a poem about poems and about some often used poetic devices. To begin our evening, here is Craig Whitman reading Ogden Nash's Very Like a Whale.
One thing that literature would be greatly the better for would be a more restricted employment by the authors of simile and metaphor. Authors of all races, be they Romans, Greeks, Teutons, or Celts, can't seem just to say that anything is the thing it is, but have to go out of the way to say that it is like something else. What does it mean when we are told that the Assyrian came down like a wolf on the fold? In the first place, George Gordon Byron had enough experience to know that it probably wasn't just one Assyrian, it was a lot of Assyrians. However, as too many arguments are apt to induce apoplexy and thus hinder longevity, we'll let it pass as one Assyrian for the sake of brevity. Now, then, this particular Assyrian, this one whose cohorts were gleaming in purple and gold, just what does the poet mean when he says they came down like a wolf on the fold? In heaven and earth, more than is dreamed of in our philosophy, there are a great many things. But I don't imagine that among them there is a wolf with purple and gold cohorts or purple and gold anythings. No, Lord Byron, before I'll believe that this Assyrian was actually like a wolf, I must have some kind of proof. Did he run on all fours, have a hairy tail, a big red mouth, big white teeth, and say woof, woof? Frankly, I think that is very unlikely. And all you were entitled to say, at the very most, was that the Assyrian cohorts came down like a lot of Assyrian cohorts about to destroy the Hebrew host. But that wasn't enough for Lord Byron. Oh, dear me, no. He had to invent a lot of figures of speech and then interpolate them. With the result that whenever you mention Old Testament soldiers to people, they say, oh, yes, they're the ones that a lot of wolves dressed up in gold and purple ate them. Now, that's the kind of thing that's being done all the time by poets. From Homer to Tennyson, they're always comparing ladies to lilies and veal to venison. And they always say things like that, the snow is a white blanket after a winter storm. Oh, is it? All right then. You sleep under a 6-inch blanket of snow, and I'll sleep under a 6-inch blanket of unpoetical blanket material, and we'll see which one keeps warm. And after that, maybe you'll be able to comprehend dimly what I mean by too much metaphor and simile.
Robert Frost is one of the most well-known poets in the history of the United States. A 4-time Pulitzer Prize-winning poet who was nominated 31 times for the Nobel Peace Prize in Literature. He was also the Poet Laureate of Vermont. Timothy J. Cox reads one of Frost's most beloved poems, The Road Not Taken.
Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other, as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that the passing there had worn them really about the same, and both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day. Yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh somewhere, ages and ages hence. Two roads diverge in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference.
Audre Lorde, in Hanging Fire, explores a teenager dealing with the most painful and confusing of subjects, growing up. Hanging Fire by Audre Lorde, read by Nicole Brandon.
I am 14, and my skin has betrayed me. The boy I cannot live without still sucks his thumb in secret. How come my knees are always so ashy? But what if I die before morning and mama's in the bedroom with the door closed? I have to learn how to dance in time for the next party. My room is too small for me. Suppose I die before graduation. They will sing sad melodies, but finally tell the truth about me. There is nothing I want to do and too much that has to be done, and mama's in the bedroom with the door closed. Nobody even stops to think about my side of it. I should have been on the math team. My marks were better than his. But why do I have to be the one wearing braces? I have nothing to wear tomorrow. Will I live long enough to grow up? And mama's in the bedroom with the door closed.
Edgar Guest was known as the people's poet, born in Great Britain but raised in Detroit, where he lived his entire life. Guest's poetry was usually very positive and very inspirational. Martin Pfefferkorn with Edgar Guest's You.
You are the fellow that has to decide whether you'll do it or toss it aside. You are the fellow who makes up your mind, whether you'll lead or will linger behind, whether you'll try for the goal that's afar or just be contented to stay where you are. Take it or leave it. Here's something to do. Just think it over. It's all up to you. What do you wish? To be known as a shirk? Known as a good man who's willing to work? Scorned for a loafer, or praised by your chief, rich man, or poor man, or beggar, or thief, eager or earnest, or dull through the day, honest or crooked, it's you who must say. You must decide in the face of the test whether you'll shirk it or give it your best. Nobody here will compel you to rise. No one will force you to open your eyes. No one will answer for you yes or no, whether to stay there or whether to go. Life is a game, but it's you who must say whether it's cheat or as a sportsman you'll play. Fate may betray you, but you settle first, whether to live to your best or to your worst. So, whatever it is you are wanting to be, remember to fashion the choice. You are free, kindly or selfish, or gentle or strong, keeping the right way or taking the wrong, careless of honor or guarding your pride. All these are questions which you must decide. Yours the selection, whichever you do, the thing men call characters, all up to you.
What we sometimes overlook is the fact that lyricists are also poets. Some lyrics can be as powerful without being sung as they are when sung. Here is Michael Green with the lyrics to Sounds of Silence, written by Paul Simon.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again because a vision softly creeping left its seats while I was sleeping. And the vision that was planted in my brain still remains within the sound of silence. In restless dreams, I walked alone, narrow streets of cobblestone. Neath the halo of a street lamp, I turned my collar to the cold and damp. When my eyes were stabbed by the flash of a neon light that split the night and touched the sound of silence. And in the naked light, I saw 10,000 people, maybe more, people talking without speaking, people hearing without listening, people writing songs that voices never share, and no one dare disturb the sound of silence. Fools, said I, you do not know. Silence like a cancer grows. Hear my words that I might teach you. Take my arms that I might reach you. But my words, like silent raindrops, fell and echoed in the wells of silence. And the people bowed and prayed to the neon god they made. And the sign flashed out its warning in the words that I was forming. And the sign said, the words of the prophets are written on the subway walls and tenement halls, and whispered in the sound of silence.
Alan Seeger's I Have a Rendezvous with Death was a favorite poem of John F. Kennedy. Alan Seeger was first published after he joined the French Foreign Legion during World War I. His most famous poem, I Have a Rendezvous with Death, was published posthumously after he was killed in action during the war. Here now, Alan Dolderer with I Have a Rendezvous with Death by Alan Seeger.
I have a rendezvous with death at some disputed barricade when spring comes back with a rustling shade and apple blossoms fill the air. I have a rendezvous with death when spring brings back blue days and fair. It may be he shall take my hand and lead me into his dark land and close my eyes and quench my breath. It may be I shall pass him still. I have a rendezvous with death on some scarred slope of battered hill when spring comes around again this year and the first meadow flowers appear. God knows 'twere better to be deep pillowed in silk and scented down, where love throbs out in blissful sleep, pulse nigh to pulse and breath to breath, where hushed awakenings are dear. But I've a rendezvous with death at midnight in some flaming town when spring trips north again this year. And I, to my pledged word, am true. I shall not fail that rendezvous.
E. Cummings was one of the most prolific poets in American literature, having composed over 2,900 poems. He is considered one of the fathers of modern free-form poetry. In this piece, Cummings shows that free form can be used for one of the oldest themes in poetry, the love poem. Darren Dunstan with E. Cummings, I carry your heart with me, I carry it in.
I carry your heart with me. I carry it in my heart. I'm never without it. Anywhere I go, you go, my dear. And whatever is done by only me is your doing, my darling. I fear no fate, for you are my fate, my sweet. I want no world, for beautiful you are my world, my true. And it's you are whatever a moon has always meant, and whatever a sun will always sing is you. Here is the deepest secret nobody knows. Here is the root of the root and the bud of the bud and the sky of a tree called life, which grows higher than soul can hope or mind can hide. And this is the wonder that's keeping the stars apart. I carry your heart. I carry it in my heart.
We move now to a current poet. Rupi Kaur is considered a leader in the art form known as Insta poetry, a modern poetry style that is meant to be shared on social media. Here is Kay Cook with Rupi Kaur's Timeless.
They convinced me I only had a few good years left before I was replaced by a girl younger than me, as though men yield power with age, but women grow into irrelevance. They can keep their lies, for I have just gotten started. I feel as though I have just left the womb. My 20s are the warm up for what I'm really about to do. Wait until you see me in my 30s. Now that will be a proper introduction to the nasty, wild woman in me. How can I leave before the party started? Rehearsals begin at 40. I ripen with age. I do not come with an expiration date. And now for the main event. Curtains up at 50. Let's begin the show.
Emily Dickinson only had 10 poems published during her lifetime. These were published anonymously in periodicals and heavily edited to conform to the conventions of the time. After her death, her younger sister discovered almost 1,800 additional poems that Emily had written. The first book of her verse was published 4 years after her passing, and within a few years, Emily Dickinson was considered one of the most important female poets in American literature. She is still considered that to this day. Michael Johnson with Emily Dickinson's Hope is the Thing with Feathers.
Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. And sweetest in the gale is heard, and sore must be the storm that could abash the little bird that kept so many warm. I've heard it in the chillest land and on the strangest sea, yet never in extremity it asked a crumb of me.
One of the most popular poets of his time, Edgar Guest, is often overlooked now. To help familiarize people with him again, here is another Edgar Guest poem, The Few, as read by Frank Frankenary.
The easy roads are crowded, and the level roads are jammed. The pleasant little rivers with the drifting folks are crammed. But off yonder, where it's rocky, where you get a better view, you will find the ranks are thinning, and the travelers are few. Where the going's smooth and pleasant, you will always find the throng. For the many, more's the pity, seem to like to drift along. But the steeps that call for courage, and the task that's hard to do, in the end result in glory for the never wavering few.
Nikki Giovanni was one of the foremost writers of the Black arts movement of the 1960s. Since then, she has become one of the best-known poets in the world. Her work is diverse in its nature, tone, and audience. Here is Meredith Watson with Nikki Giovanni's Spring Blooms.
Everyone knows and spring love grows among the birds and the bees and the humans too. That squiggly worm which makes the soil turn also falls in love. The robin gets up as an early bird should to catch a careless bug, but maybe the robin has made a mistake and simply wanted a hug. At any rate, I need a date with you to watch the moon bloom. We'll sit and we'll chat about this and that, and maybe like the owl and that cat, we'll dance by the light of the moon. The moon. We can dance by the light of the moon.
Walt Whitman was the voice of the country and of the beauty of the country's nature in poetic form for the last half of the 19th century. His poetry was a part of the transition between the romantic transcendentalism and more modern realism in the art, and he is considered the father of free verse. Wendy Watt with Walt Whitman's A Noiseless, Patient Spider.
A noiseless, patient spider. I marked where on a little promontory it stood, isolated, marked how to explore the vacant, vast surrounding. It launched forth filament, filament, filament out of itself, ever unreeling them, ever tirelessly speeding them. And you, O my soul, where you stand, surrounded, detached, in measureless oceans of space, ceaselessly musing, venturing, throwing, seeking the spheres to connect them, so the bridge you will need be formed, till the ductile anchor hold, till the gossamer thread you fling catch somewhere, O my soul.
James Whitcomb Riley is called the Hoosier poet. He is remembered all through the state of Indiana. He was known for his writing in the Midwest dialect, as seen here in Out to Old Aunt Mary's, as read by our very own Buckeye, Craig Wickman.
Wasn't it pleasant, oh brother mine, in those old days of the lost sunshine of youth, when the Saturday's chores were through and the Sunday's wood in the kitchen too, and we went visiting, me and you, out to old Aunt Mary's? Me and you, in the morning fair, with the dewdrops twinkling everywhere, the scent of cherry blossoms blown after us in the roadway lone, our capering shadows onward thrown, out to old Aunt Mary's. It all comes back so clear today, though I am as bald as you are gray. Out by the barn lot, down the lane, we patter along in the dust again, as light as the tips of the drops of the rain, out to old Aunt Mary's. Those last few houses of the town, and then up the high creek bluffs and down, past that squat toll gate with the well-sweep pole, the bridge, the old baptizing hole, loitering, awed, or pool and shoal, out to old Aunt Mary's. We crossed the pasture, through the wood, where the old gray snag of the poplar stood, with the hammering redheads hopping awry and the buzzard raised in the clearing sky and lolled and circled as we went by, out to old Aunt Mary's. Or stayed by the glint of the redbird's wings or the glitter of song that the bluebird sings, all hushed. We feign to strike strange trails, as the big braves did in the Indian tales, till again our real quest lags and fails, out to old Aunt Mary's. And the woodland echoed with yells of mirth that make the old war whoops of minor worth. Were such heroes of war as we, with bows and arrows of fantasy, chasing each other from tree to tree, out to old Aunt Mary's? And then, in the dust of the road again, the teams we met, and the countrymen, and the long highway with sunshine spread as thick as butter on country bread, our cares behind and our hearts ahead, out to old Aunt Mary's. For only now, at the road's next bend to the right, we could make out the gable end of the fine old Houston homestead, not half a mile from that sacred spot where dwelt our saint in her simple cot, out to old Aunt Mary's. I see her now, in the open door, where the little gourds grew up the sides and o'er the clapboard roof, and her face. Me, wasn't it good for a boy to see, and wasn't it good for a boy to be, out to old Aunt Mary's? The jellies, the jam, and the marmalade, the cherry and quince preserves she made, the sweet sour pickles of peach and pear with cinnamon in 'em, and all things rare. And the more we ate was the more to spare, out to old Aunt Mary's. Oh, was there ever so kind a face, as gentle as hers, or such a grace of welcoming as she cut the cake, or the juicy pies she joyed to make just for the visiting children's sake, out to old Aunt Mary's. The honey, too, in its amber comb, one only finds in an old farm home, and the coffee, fragrant and sweet, and oh, so hot that we gloried to drink it so, with spangles of tears in our eyes, out to old Aunt Mary's. and the romps we took in our glad unrest? Was it the lawn we loved the best, with its swooping swing in the locust trees? Or was it the grove with the leafy breeze? Or that dim hay mow with its fragrancies out to old Aunt Mary's? Far fields, bottomlands, creek banks, all we ranged at will, where the waterfall laughed all day as it slowly poured over the dam by the old mill ford, where the tail race writhed and the mill wheel roared out to old Aunt Mary's. But home, with Auntie in near recall, that was the best place after all. The talks on the back porch in the low slanting sun and the evening glow, with a voice of counsel that touched us so, out to old Aunt Mary's. And then in the garden near the side where the beehives were and the path was wide, the apple house, like a fairy cell, with the little square door we knew so well, and the wealth inside but our tongues could tell, out to old Aunt Mary's. And the old spring house in the cool green bloom of the willow trees and the cooler room, where the swinging shelves and the crocks were kept, where the cream and golden languor slept, and the water gurgled and laughed and wept, out to old Aunt Mary's. And as many a time have you and I, barefoot boys in the days gone by, knelt and in tremulous ecstasies dipped our lips into sweets like these. Memory now is on her knees, out to old Aunt Mary's. For oh, my brother, so far away, this is to tell you she waits today to welcome us. Aunt Mary fell asleep this morning, whispering, "Tell the boys to come." And all is well, out to old Aunt Mary's.
Shel Silverstein was an American writer, poet, cartoonist, songwriter, and playwright. His writings ranged from children's books to stories for Playboy magazine. His work could be very humorous, and often very darkly humorous. Here is Steve Viola with Shel Silverstein's Clooney the Clown.
I'll tell you the story of Clooney the Clown, who worked in a circus that came through town. His shoes were too big and his hat was too small, but he just wasn't funny at all. He had a trombone to play loud, silly tunes. He had a green dog and 1,000 balloons. He was floppy and sloppy and skinny and tall, but he just wasn't funny at all. And every time he did a trick, everyone felt a little sick. And every time he told a joke, folks sighed as if their hearts were broke. And every time he lost a shoe, everyone looked awfully blue. And every time he stood on his head, everyone screamed, "Go back to bed." And every time he made a leap, everybody fell asleep. And every time he ate his tie, everyone began to cry. And Clooney could not make any money simply because he was not funny. One day he said, "I'll tell this town how it feels to be an unfunny clown." And he told them all why he looked so sad, and he told them all why he felt so bad. He told of pain and rain and cold. He told of darkness in his soul. But after he finished his tale of woe, did everyone cry? Oh, no, no, no. They laughed until they shook the trees with ha-ha-has and he-he-he's. They laughed with howls and yowls and shrieks. They laughed all day. They laughed all week. They laughed until they had a fit. They laughed until their jackets split. The laughter spread for miles around to every city, every town, over mountains, across the sea, from Saint-Tropez to Mont-Saint-Denis. And soon, the whole world rang with laughter, lasting till forever after. While Clooney sat in the circus tent with his head drooped low and his shoulders bent, And he said, "That is not what I meant. I'm funny just by accident." While the world laughed outside, Clooney the clown sat down and cried.
Thomas Hardy is remembered today mostly for his novels. However, during his lifetime, he was one of the most highly regarded poets of his time. Fittingly, he is buried in the Poets' Corner of Westminster Abbey. Mike Timoney now reads, "He Never Expected Much" by Thomas Hardy.
Well, world, you have kept faith with me, kept faith with me. Upon the whole, you have proved to be much as you said you were, since as a child I used to lie upon the leas and watch the sky. Never, I own, expected I that life would all be fair. 'Twas then you said, and since have said, times since have said in that mysterious voice you shed from clouds and hills around, many have loved me desperately, many with smooth serenity, while some have shown contempt of me till they dropped underground. I do not promise over much, child, over much, just neutral tinted haps and such, you said to minds like mine. Wise warning for your credit's sake, which I for one failed not to take, and hence could stem such strain and ache as each year might assign.
Rumi is considered by most to be the greatest Persian poet in history. Interestingly, Rumi is also the best-selling poet in the world. Here is Cuby with "In the Arms of the Beloved" by Rumi.
Who is at my door? He said, "Who is at my door?" I said, "Your humble servant." He said, "What business do you have?" I said, "To greet you, O Lord." He said, "How long will you journey on?" I said, "Until you stop me." He said, "How long will you boil in the fire?" I said, "Until I am pure." This is my oath of love. For the sake of love, I gave up wealth and position. He said, "You have pleaded your case, but you have no witness." I said, "My tears are my witness. The pallor of my face is my proof." He said, "Your witness has no credibility. Your eyes are too wet to see." I said, "By the splendor of your justice, my eyes are clear and faultless." He said, "What do you seek?" I said, "To have you as my constant friend." He said, "What do you want from me?" I said, "Your abundant grace." He said, "Who was your companion on the journey?" I said, "I thought of you, O king." He said, "What called you here?" I said, "The fragrance of your wine." He said, "What brings you the most fulfillment?" I said, "The company of the emperor." He said, "What do you find there?" I said, 100 miracles. He said, "Why is the palace deserted?" I said, "They all fear the thief." He said, "Who is the thief?" I said, "The one who keeps me from you." He said, "Where is their safety?" I said, "In the service of renunciation." He said, "What is there to renounce?" I said, "The hope of salvation." He said, "Where is their calamity?" I said, "In the presence of your love." He said, "How do you benefit from this life?" I said, "By keeping true to myself." Now it is the time for silence. If I told you about his true essence, you would fly from yourself and be gone, and neither door nor roof could hold you back.
One of the most prolific lyricists of the last 65 years is a native of Texas by the name of Willie Nelson. Willie Nelson's lyrics cover everything from love and loneliness and from whiskey to touring with a band. Here is Bob Rutan with Willie Nelson's My Heroes Have Always Been Cowboys.
I grew up a dreaming of being a cowboy and loving the cowboy ways. Pursuing the life of my high-riding heroes, I burned up my childhood days. I learned all the rules of a modern-day drifter. Don't you hold on to nothing too long. Just take what you need from the ladies, then leave them with the words of a sad country song. Cowboys are special, with their own brand of misery from being alone too long. You could die from the cold in the arms of a nightmare, knowing well that your best days are gone. Picking up hookers instead of my pen, I let the words of my youth fade away. Worn out old saddles, worn out old memories, with no one and no place to stay. My heroes have always been cowboys, and they still are, it seems. Sadly in search of, and one step in back of, themselves and their slow-moving dreams.
It is a true honor to have some performers with us this evening who have written pieces of their own. The poems you're going to hear on either side of our intermission are being read by their authors. First, we have Michael Marr with Desert Eclipse.
Somewhere in the southwest of my soul you exist. Besieged by a state of Texas, I'm a hostage to your gunfire, pal. I'm in limbo. Desperado with your Indian eyes, you neglect the fires and let them die. The mourning of the elders shrouds the night. The lasso slack falls to the dust. The trail ends here. We're up a stream without a paddle, so to speak. The canteen that you left, it has no water. I'm blinded in a desert mirage. My load is heavy. My legs are weak. Where is the fiendish God that sent me here? To confound me, he sent me you, a grinning chief with his false peace pipe, his peyote in a sandstorm cup. We drank the lot and swam the seas. Then you left me like a fish pulled ashore to flounder. Your campfire's out. I'm forgetting you. The shaft's bright wound has slowed its blood. I'm sitting here back in God's pure country. God bless, I'm home. But somewhere in the southwest of my soul, you still exist. You're the brave that got away. No stones are turned to mark the trail of your escape. Neath this devil's moon, you're still me mate. And I will curse and love this Indian to my grave.
Our next original piece is At the Temple of Poseidon, written and performed by Yasmin Rana.
At the Temple of Poseidon, wind slapping still wavy black hair with specks of light and traces of lines on a hollowed face. At the Temple of Poseidon 30 years ago, before the light and lines, before the hollowed face, before the stories to tell, 30 years before, sitting inside a windowless, suffocating box at a desk and a chair, and a chair and a desk wound into one restraining contraption for the right-handed damn. Without the specks of light and traces of line, reading Thucydides and Sophocles and tales of marriages like Jason and Medea's and triumphs like Lysistrata's, to a 17-year-old with wavy black hair in a sea of straight blondes, lost, falling, foreign, distant, Greek to me. Now fast forward 30 years to marriages like Jason and Medea's, to triumphs like Lysistrata's, me too, to lines, to the hallowed face that tells stories, me too. All stories? Not all, not yet. But fast forward another 30 years, if possible, if here, if standing on the anointed soil at the temple of Poseidon, with more specks of light and more lines, and a more hallowed face, but hair still wavy and black. Maybe.
The first act has reached its limits, so we will take a break of 5 minutes, but we will be back in 5 with more poetry presented live. So we hope in 5 minutes that you will stay with us for our Act 2.
Welcome back to No Epilogue Productions Evening of Poetry. We start this second act with another original poem, Met, or The Truth I Learned from You, performed by the poet herself, Eva Jacobs.
My mother is an atheist. Any notion of God obscured by the weight bearing down on her bent back, drowned out by the sound of artillery fire inside her body against body, mind against mind, endless war with an erstwhile friend. Would a benevolent God do this? God wouldn't take the human body and turn it in on itself, eating away at itself, for they created it themselves, and they said it was good, right? They wouldn't take her legs and wrap them in the resounding silence of questions unanswered. She is Atlas, holding up the world, holding up the weight of everyone else's faith that she was chosen to bear arbitrarily but cannot share. I guess that's why she always seems so tired. God wouldn't steal away her livelihood, her autonomy. My childhood wouldn't render us immobile, make us perpetually paralyzed, me pathologically petrified to move forward for fear of leaving her behind. No, a benevolent God wouldn't do this. I want to tell her I found faith for her, but sometimes I falter. What does it mean to have faith today anyway? Too often I lose it in the skies, asphyxiated there by the fear that I'll become her successor, holding up the world like her and her mother before her. Like mother, like daughter, I guess. But for her sake, I search, and for her sake, I tell her that in my temple, I find no fear of a diagnosis. In my temple, I hear a promise of strength and survival. I hear the voices of Ruth and Esther, the music of Miriam rejoicing the journey, and Eve pressing questions into the pages of her story, pulling at the thread that defined her until she became something else. I wish I could rewrite my mother's story for her. Instead, I can help pull at the threads. It's the least I can do because I hear her in my temple too. My namesake was not just a woman made from someone else's rib. My forebear was forged in her own fire, hammered out her own lines and shiny exterior, left me heirlooms inscribed with questions I may never answer, but provided stable ground I can rely on by the truth of her example. Not burned away by the multiple sclerosis, it seeps from under the floorboards of my childhood home. Door le door it goes. This little faith I will be okay is my true inheritance. I was raised with all the evidence I needed to believe in something.
Here again is Michael Marr with another of his own poems, Silence Corrupts.
Victor Hernandez Cruz was born in Puerto Rico and raised in New York. In 1981, Life magazine named him one of America's greatest poets. In this poem, Cruz shows the power of his craft. Today's a Day of Great Joy by Victor Hernandez Cruz, read by Michael Johnson.
Today is a day of great joy. When they stop poems in the mail and clap their hands and dance to them. When women become pregnant by the sight of poems, the strongest sounds making the river go long. It is a great day as poems fall down to movie crowds, in restaurants, in bars. When poems start to knock down walls to choke politicians. When poems scream and begin to break the air. That is the time of true poets. That is the time of greatness. A true poet aiming poems and watching things fall to the ground. It is a great day.
One of the earliest innovators of the literary art form called jazz poetry, Langston Hughes is best remembered as a leader of the Harlem Renaissance. He was one of the first African American poets to get recognition by non-Black audiences and critics in this country. Here is QB with Langston Hughes' theme for English B.
The instructor said, "Go home and write a page tonight, and let that page come out of you. Then it will be true." I wonder if it's that simple. I am 22, colored, born in Winston-Salem. I went to school there, then Durham, then here to this college on the hill above Harlem. I'm the only colored student in my class. The steps from the hill lead down into Harlem through a park. Then I cross St. Nicholas, 8th Avenue, 7th, and then I come to the Y, the Harlem Branch Y, where I take the elevator up to my room, sit down, and write this page. It's not easy to know what is true for you or me at 22, my age. But I guess I'm what I feel and see and hear. Harlem, I hear you, hear me, we too, you, me, talk on this page. I hear New York too. Me, who? Well, I like to eat, sleep, drink, and be in love. I like to work, read, learn, and understand life. I like a pipe for a Christmas present, or records, Bessie, Bop, or Bach. I guess being colored doesn't make me not like the same things other folks like who are other races. So, will my page be colored that I write? Being me, it will not be white, but it will be a part of you, instructor. You are white, yet a part of me, as I am a part of you. That's American. Sometimes perhaps you don't want to be a part of me, nor do I often want to be a part of you, but we are. That's true. As I learn from you, I guess you learn from me, although you're older and white and somewhat more free. This is my page for English B.
Nikki Giovanni's work could be several shows of their own. Here again is Meredith Watson with I Hate Mondays.
I hate Mondays and Tuesdays, and especially Wednesdays and Thursdays. I despise Fridays because Friday nights come, and Saturdays in the evening when other folk are getting bathed and smelling good and dressing in something red and smiling. I have a special place in my heart to hate. I'm not fond of Sundays either, and every day of the week is awful. I hate whole months too, and seasons. Do I ever hate seasons? Spring when everything is new, summer with its salty sweat, autumn when the gathering starts, and that winter cuddle. I hate it. I hate hours too, and minutes. I even hate seconds. I hate it all because I really hate not being in love with you anymore.
Margaret Atwood is well known these days for her novel The Handmaid's Tale, which has been adapted to television. Her 18 books of poetry span a vast array of themes and tones, but whatever the theme, her works are full of stirring imagery, as in this piece, Footnote to the Amnesty Report on Torture, read by Wendy Watt.
The torture chamber is not like anything you would have expected. No opera set or sexy chains and leather goods from the glossy porno magazines. No 30s horror dungeon with gauzy cobwebs. Nor is it the bare, cold-lighted chrome space of the future we think we fear. More like one of the seedier British railways stations, with scratched green walls and spilled tea, crumpled papers, and a stooped man who is always cleaning the floor. It stinks, though, like a hospital. of antiseptics and sickness, and on some days, blood, which smells the same anywhere, here or at the butcher's. The man who works here is losing his sense of smell. He's glad to have this job because there are few others. He isn't a torturer, he only cleans the floor. Every morning, the same vomit, the same shed teeth, the same piss and liquid shit, the same panic. Some have courage. Others don't. Those who do what he thinks of as the real work, and who are bored, since minor bureaucrats are always bored, tell them it doesn't matter. Who will ever know they were brave? They might as well talk now and get it over. Some have nothing to say, which also doesn't matter. Their warped bodies, too, with the torn fingers and ragged tongues, are thrown over the spiked iron fence onto the consul's lawn, along with the bodies of the children burned to make their mothers talk. The man who cleans the floors is glad it isn't him. It will be if he ever says what he knows. He works long hours, submits to the searches, eats a meal he brings from home, which tastes of old blood and the sawdust he cleans the floor with. His wife is pleased he brings her money for the food, and has been told not to ask questions. As he sweeps, he tries not to listen. He tries to make himself into a wall, a thick wall, a wall soft and without echoes. He thinks of nothing but the walk back to his hot shed of a house, of the door opening and his children with their unmarked skin and flawless eyes running to meet him. He is afraid of what he might do if he were told to. He is afraid of the door. He is afraid not of the door, but of the door opening. Sometimes, no matter how hard he tries, his children are not there.
Not all of Robert Frost's poems reflected life in New England, as seen in this Robert Frost poem, Fire and Ice, read by Darren Dunstan.
Some say the world will end in fire. Some say ice. From what I've tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. But if it had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to say that for destruction, ice is also great and would suffice.
Now again, here is Michael Marr with his original poem.
It's a sophisticated sorrow like the blues by late night lampposts, lingering clouds dripped into dawns, tight-chested sighing, dark leather shoes, Italian style, click past on damp and cobbled bricks, lace curtains cross your window's pane, shut out the dawn. It's a civilized separation. We turn our profiles to the wall. Once thralled in love, we now pose in cold conclusion. With sherry glass raised, I toast the shadow you left behind without a voice. No need to say love's brutal words, best to avoid. So if I pass you on the street or stand a distance down the bar, do we nod and glance away to dismiss the love? Or do we rather stare down at our hands with blinded focus on our drink and keep the past within the past, a guiltless blunder? Battle, the baby be broken, bunny be barren by booze. Battle, the baby be broken, Binny be barren by booze. Forgive me for any breach, but I long to wail and howl and scream. Throw plates and plants against the walls, smash up the stove. I need my lungs to fill with rage, batter your walls with street abuse, and dog it out till we strip our fury to its core. It's sophisticated sorrow that eats away into my soul, like nicotine that burns at lungs and turns them black. I nod in stupid acquiescence as my friends do ramble on. It all has no meaning now, but once it glistened.
James Baldwin was another poet known more for his novels and essays than for his poetry. But his poetry is as powerful in its statements as his other writings. Here is QB again with James Baldwin's The Giver.
If the hope of giving is to love the living, the giver risks madness in the act of giving. Some such lesson I seem to see in the faces that surrounded me. Needy and blind, unhopeful, unlifted, what gift would give them the gift to be gifted? The giver is no less adrift than those who are clamoring for the gift. If they cannot claim it, if it is not there, if their empty fingers beat the empty air, and the giver goes down on his knees in prayer, knows that all of his giving has been for naught, and that nothing was ever what he thought, and turns in his guilty bed to stare at the starving multitude standing there, and rises from bed to curse at heaven, he must yet understand that to whom much is given, much will be taken, and justly so. I cannot tell how much I owe.
When Queen Elizabeth first met Margaret Thatcher, she remarked that Thatcher was not particularly well liked by many in the British government. Thatcher replied by reciting Charles Mackay's poem, You Have No Enemies. Here is Mike Timoney with You Have No Enemies.
You have no enemies, you say? Alas, my friend, the boast is poor. He who has mingled in the fray of duty that the brave endure must have made foes. If you have none, small is the work that you have done. You've hit no traitor on the hip. You've dashed no cup from perjured lip. You've never turned the wrong to right. You've been a coward in the fight.
Part of Langston Hughes's appeal was that he spoke to themes that were true for everyone. Here is Bob Rutan with Langston Hughes' Dreams.
Hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken winged bird that cannot fly. Hold fast to dreams, for when dreams go, life is a barren field, frozen with snow.
Dylan Thomas is noted for his original, rhythmic, and ingenious use of words and imagery. He was one of the first poets to be known almost as much as the performer of his works as the writer of them, as he made many radio appearances in the earliest days of that medium, both in Great Britain and in the United States. Here now is Frank Francaneri with Dylan Thomas's most famous work, Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night.
Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay, rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight and learned too late they grieve it on its way, do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light.
William Ernest Henley was a British literary critic in late Victorian England and friends with such esteemed writers as J.M. Barrie and Robert Louis Stevenson. Henley developed tuberculosis of the bone at the age of 12, and it led to many other health issues in his life. As a result, he was in hospital for treatment frequently throughout his life. During his life, he published several books of poetry he called hospital poems, as he wrote about things he witnessed in these hospital stays. The most famous of these hospital poems, Invictus, is now presented by Timothy Cox.
Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody, but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how strait the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul.
Rudyard Kipling was another poet as well as a novelist and a short story writer. His writings spanned from children's stories to adventure tales and were often inspired by his upbringing in colonial India. While a British poet, he actually did a lot of his writing in Lakewood, New Jersey at the turn of the 20th century. Here is Mike Timoney with Rudyard Kipling's If.
If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too, if you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good, nor talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think but not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken and stoop and build them up with worn out tools, if you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss and lose and start again at your beginnings and never breathe a word about your loss, if you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it. And which is more, you'll be a man, my son.
Here again with Nikki Giovanni's Biscuits, dropped or baked, is Meredith Watson.
First, you harvest the laughter. Local is best, but sometimes you need nationwide to really get the bellows. Mix a bit of dirt, not the serious hurting kind, but the kind you'll find in the beauty parlor or barbershop. Parlor, parlay, biscuits, all the same. Then gently fold in some grandmother love. There's always a bit of grandmotherly love somewhere. Some days, though, I will admit, it can be more difficult to find than others. Call a girlfriend for dropped or an old love for baked. Either way, you'll know when they're done. Oops, we forgot the salt. You can laugh till you cry or cry till you laugh. The salt will come. Crispy brown ready. Serve them warm. Remembering summer mornings before church or Saturday evenings with fried fish. Biscuits always bring memories of home.
We heard Shel Silverstein's darker side earlier. Here is one of his lighter pieces, Sick, read by Kay Cook.
I cannot go to school today, said little Peggy Ann McKay. I have the measles and the mumps, a gash, a rash, and purple bumps. My mouth is wet, my throat is dry. I'm going blind in my right eye. My tonsils are as big as rocks, and I've counted 16 chicken pox, and there's one more, that's 17. And don't you think my face looks green? My leg is cut, and my eyes are blue. It might be instamatic flu. I cough and sneeze and gasp and choke. I'm sure that my left leg is broke. My hip hurts when I move my chin, and my belly button's caving in. My back is wrenched, my ankles sprained. My appendix pains each time it rains. My nose is cold. My toes are numb. I've got a sliver in my thumb. My neck is stiff, and my voice is weak. I hardly whisper when I speak. My tongue is filling up my mouth. I think my hair is falling out. My elbow's bent, and my spine ain't straight. My temperature is 108. My brain is shrunk. I cannot hear. There's a hole inside my ear. I have a hangnail, and my heart is... What? What's that you say? You say today is Saturday? Goodbye. I'm going out to play.
Billy Collins was the Poet Laureate of the United States from 2001 to 2003. The New York Times called him the most popular poet in America. Collins is known for his conversational, witty poems that welcome readers with humor, but often slip into quirky, tender, or profound observation on the everyday. Here is Steve Viola with Billy Collins, The Art of Drowning.
I wonder how it all got started, this business about seeing your life flash before your eyes while you drown, as if panic or the act of submergence could startle time into thick compression, crushing decades in the vice of your desperate final seconds. After falling off a steamship or being swept away in a rush of floodwaters, wouldn't you hope for a more leisurely review? An invisible hand turning the pages of an album of photographs, you on a pony, or blowing out candles in a conic hat. How about a short animated film, a slide presentation, your life expressed in an essay or in one model photograph? Wouldn't any form be better than this sudden flash? Your whole existence going off in your face in an eyebrow-singeing explosion of biography? Nothing like the 3 large volumes you envisioned. Survivors would have us believe in a brilliance here, some bolt of truth forking across the water, an ultimate light before all the lights go out, dawning on you with all its megalithic tonnage. But if something does flash before your eyes as you go under, it will probably be a fish, a quick blur of curved silver darting away, having nothing to do with your life or your death. The tide will take you, or the lake will accept it all as you sink toward the weedy disarray of the bottom, leaving behind what you've already forgotten, the surface, now overrun with the high travel of clouds.
Robinson Jeffers wrote epic poetry and shorter verse. Much of his work was narrative and often written in the first person. In this piece, The House Dog's Grave, the narrator is Haig, an English bulldog. Here now, Alan Dolderer with The House Dog's Grave by Robinson Jeffers.
I changed my ways a little. I cannot now roam with you in the evenings along the shore, except in a kind of dream. And you, if you dream a moment, you see me there. So leave a while the poor marks on the front door where I used to scratch to go out or in, and you'd soon open. Leave on the kitchen floor the marks of my drinking pan. I cannot lie by your fire as I used to do on the warm stone, nor at the foot of your bed. No, all the nights through I lie alone. But your kind thought has laid me less than 6 feet outside your window, where firelight so often plays, and where you sit to read and or fear often grieving for me. Every night your lamplight lies on my place. You, man and woman, live so long, it is hard to think of you ever dying. A little dog would get tired living so long. I hope that when you are lying under the ground like me, your lives will appear as good and joyful as mine. No, dears, that's too much hope. You were not so well cared for as I have been, and never have known the passionate, undivided fidelities that I knew. Your minds are perhaps too active, too many-sided, but to me you were true. You were never masters, but friends. I was your friend. I loved you well and was loved. Deep love endures to the end and far past the end. If this is my end, I'm not lonely. I'm not afraid. I am still yours.
Joy Harjo is the current Poet Laureate of the United States. She is the first Native American to hold that honor. Harjo's works often include themes such as defining self, the arts, and social justice. Here is Michael Johnson with Joy Harjo's Remember.
Remember the sky that you were born under. Know each of the stars' stories. Remember the moon. Know who she is. Remember the sun's birth at dawn. That is the strongest point of time. Remember sundown and the giving away tonight. Remember your birth, how your mother struggled to give you form and breath. You are evidence of her life and her mother's and hers. Remember your father. He is your life also. Remember the earth whose skin you are, red earth, black earth, yellow earth, white earth, brown earth. We are earth. Remember the plants, the trees, animal life, who all have their tribes, their families, their histories too. Talk to them, listen to them. They are alive poems. Remember the wind. Remember her voice. She knows the origin of this universe. Remember, you are all people and all people are you. Remember, you are this universe and this universe is you. Remember, all is in motion, is growing, is you. Remember, language comes from this. Remember the dance language is that life is. Remember.
Jack Prelutsky was the first children's poet laureate of the United States. Claims to have hated poetry when he was younger. He stated that sometime in elementary school, I had a teacher who, in retrospect, did not like poetry herself. The syllabus told her she had to recite a poem once a week. She would pick a boring poem from a boring book and read it in a boring voice, looking bored while she was doing it. Well, fortunately, Poletsky got past that teacher and was able to go on to write deeply meaningful poetry, such as Last Night I Dreamed of Chickens, performed now by Frank Frankenary.
Thank you, Steve. Last night, I dreamed of chickens. There were chickens everywhere. They were standing on my stomach. They were nesting in my hair. They were pecking at my pillow. They were hopping on my head. They were ruffling up their feathers as they raced about my bed. They were on the chairs and tables. They were on the chandeliers. They were roosting in the corners. They were clucking in my ears. Oh, there were chickens, chickens, chickens everywhere the eye could see. For when I woke up today, I noticed there were eggs on top of me. Thank you.
Some say that lampooning something is the sincerest form of flattery. If that is true, then Henry Beard is one of the biggest flatterers in history. The co-founder of National Lampoon, Beard made his name with parody and satire. Here he digs into Edgar Allan Poe with The End of the Raven, performed by Kay Cook.
On a night quite unenchanting, when the rain was downward slanting, I awakened to the ranting of the man I catch mice for. Tipsy and a bit unshaven, in a tone I found quite craven, Poe was talking to a raven perched above the chamber door. Raven's very tasty, thought I, as I tiptoed o'er the floor. There is nothing I like more. Soft upon the rug I treaded, calm and careful as I headed toward his roost atop that dreaded bust of Pallas I deplore. While the bard and birdie chattered, I made sure that nothing clattered, creaked, or snapped, or fell, or shattered as I crossed the corridor. For his house is crammed with trinkets, curios, and weird decor, bric-a-brac and junk galore. Still the raven never fluttered, standing stock still as he uttered, in a voice that shrieked and sputtered, his 2 cents worth, "Nevermore!" While this dirge the bird brain kept up, oh, so silently I crept up. Then I crouched and quickly leapt up, pouncing on the feathered boar. Soon he was a heap of plumage and a little blood and gore. Only this and not much more. "Ooh," my pickled poet cried out, "Pussycat, it's time I dried out. Never sat I in my hideout talking to a bird before. How I've wallowed in self-pity while my gallant, valiant kitty put an end to that damn ditty." Then I heard him start to snore. Back atop the door I clambered, eyed that statue I abhor, jumped and smashed it to the floor.
William Carlos Williams was not just a poet, he was also a physician. As a poet, he was known as a modernist and an imagist. Here is Craig Wickman with This Is Just to Say by William Carlos Williams.
This is just to say, I have eaten the plums that were in the icebox, and which you were probably saving for breakfast. Forgive me. They were delicious. So sweet. And so cold.
Another lyricist, this time an obscure songwriter by the name of Paul McCartney, Golden Slumbers, read by Michael Green.
Once there was a way to get back homeward. Once there was a way to get back home. Sleep, pretty darling, do not cry, and I will sing a lullaby. Golden slumbers fill your eyes. Smiles await you when you rise. Sleep, pretty darling, do not cry, and I will sing a lullaby. Once there was a way to get back homeward. Once there was a way to get back home. Shh. Sleep, pretty darling, do not cry, and I will sing a lullaby.
Like Robert Frost, Galway Kinnell was a poet laureate of Vermont. Like Frost, Kinnell won the Pulitzer Prize for poetry. An admitted follower of Walt Whitman, Kinnell rejected the idea of seeking fulfillment by escaping into the imaginary world in his poems. Here, he addresses some would-be poets in The Correspondence School Instructor Says Goodbye to His Poetry Students.
Goodbye, lady in Bangor, who sent me snapshots of yourself after definitely hinting that you were beautiful. Goodbye. Goodbye, Miami Beach urologist who enclosed plain brown envelopes for the return of your very clinical sonnet. Goodbye, manufacturer braziers on the coast whose epilogues gave the fullest treatment in literature yet to the sagging breast motif. Goodbye, you in San Quentin who wrote, "Being German, my hero is Hitler," instead of "Sincerely yours" at the end of long, neat scripted letters demolishing the pre-Raphaelites. I swear to you, it was just my way of cheering myself up as I licked the stamped self-addressed envelopes, the game I had of trying to guess which one of you this time had poisoned his glue. I did care. I did read each poem entire. I did say what I thought was the truth in the mildest words I know. And now in this poem, or chopped prose, not any better, I realized that those troubled lines I kept sending back to you, I have to say, I'm relieved it's over. At the end, I could only feel pity for that urge towards more life your poems kept smothering in words, the smell of which days later would tingle in your nostrils as new God-given impulses to write. Goodbye. You who are, for me, the postmarks again of shattered towns, Xenia, burnt cabins, Hornell. Their loneliness given away in poems. Only their solitude kept.
One more to finish this evening of verse. Just like Alan Seeger, who was represented earlier, Joyce Kilmer was killed far too young in the battlefields of World War I. This is his most famous poem, a reminder to all of us of perspective. Trees by Joyce Kilmer, read by Wendy Watt.
I think that I shall never see a poem lovely as a tree whose hungry mouth is pressed against the earth's sweet flowing breast. A tree that looks at God all day and lifts her leafy arms to pray. A tree that may in summer wear a nest of robins in her hair, upon whose bosom snow has lain, who intimately lives with rain. Poems are made by fools like me, but only God can make a tree.
And that's our evening of poetry. Thank you for joining the No Epilogue Productions Poetry Evening. And now, here's our cast.
Nicole Rose,
Timothy J. Cox.
Alan Dolderer.
Darren Dunstan.
Frank Frankenary.
Michael A. Green.
Eva Jacobs.
Michael Johnson.
A Cook.
QB.
Michael.
Martin Pfeffercorn.
Yasmin Rana.
Bob Rutan.
Mike Timoney.
Steve Viola.
Meredith A. Watson.
Wendy Watt.
Greg Wickman.
Thank you for coming to see us, and have a good evening.